Good evening. Welcome to the July 5th meeting for the Lynbrook Board of Education. This will be our reorg and our regular monthly meeting. Would you all please stand for the flag and celeste and lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, everyone is present. We'll begin our reorganization meeting. May I have a motion to appoint Teresa Moran as district clerk for the ensuing year. Further, she will be bonded under public employee dishonesty coverage in the amount of $100,000. Let's hope that's enough. Have a motion, please. Mrs. Dino, second. Ms. Aragona, all in favor? That's passed. Council, can you administer the oath to the clerk?
Raise your right hand, please. Repeat after me. I, Teresa Moran, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of District Clerk of the Lynbrook Union Free School District, Town of Hempstead, Nassau County, New York, according to the best of my ability.
Okay.
Right hand, please. I, Tara Aragona,
I, Tara Aragona,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of trustee of the Board of Education of Lynbrook Union Free School District,
of trustee of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
Town of Hempstead,
Town of Hempstead,
Nassau County,
Nassau County,
New York, to the best of my ability.
New York, to the best of my ability.
Raise your right hand, please. I, Patrick Pulaski,
I, Patrick Gillespie,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of trustee
and I will faithfully discharge the duties of trustee
of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook School District,
of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook School District,
Town of Hempstead,
Town of Hempstead,
Nassau County, New York,
Nassau County, New York,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Please raise your right hand. I, Ellen Marcus,
I, Ellen Marcus,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of trustee of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
of trustee of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
Town of Hempstead,
Town of Hempstead,
Nassau County, New York,
Nassau County, New York,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
I'd like to call for nominations of the office of president.
I nominate Mr. Belmont.
I second.
All in favor? Yes, they are. Please raise your right hand. I, Bill Belmont. William Belmont, sorry. Do solemnly swear
I solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of President of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
of President of the Board of Education for the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
Town of Hempstead,
Town of Hempstead,
Nassau County, New York,
Town of New York,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
I call for the office of Vice President nominations.
I nominate Ellen Marcus.
I second that nomination.
All in favor? I'll do this again. I, Ellen Marcus,
I, Ellen Marcus,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of Vice President of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
of Vice President of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
Town of Hempstead,
Town of Hempstead,
Nassau County, New York,
Nassau County, New York,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
I'd like to call for a nomination for the office of secretary.
I nominate Leslie Benito, secretary.
I second it.
All in favor? I, Leslie Benino, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of Secretary of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District, Town of Hempstead, Nassau County, New York, according to the best of my ability. Dr. Paul Lynch,
I, Dr. Paul Lynch,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the Superintendent of the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
of the Superintendent of the Lynbrook Union Free School District,
Town of Hempstead,
Town of Hempstead,
Nassau County, New York,
Nassau County, New York,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Now you just do
May I have a motion to appoint Deborah Barr as Assistant District Clerk for the ensuing year? Further, she'll be bonded under public dishonesty coverage in the amount of $100,000. Deborah Barr is not present. The oath of office will be administered another time. Motion please, Mr. Murray, second, Ms. Zaragoza. All in favor? Passed, thank you. May I have a motion to appoint Linda Gillespie as treasurer of Lynbrook Union Free School District. Further, should be bonded under public employee dishonesty coverage in the amount of $100,000. Should be administered the oath of office at another time. Motion, please. Mrs. Marcus, second. Mrs. Dino, all in favor? Thank you very much. That's passed. We also need to fill some positions this evening. This will be under new business, but we're going to handle that now. Legislative representative. Mrs. Dino. PTA Council Delegate, Mrs. Argona. Adult Education Advisor, Mrs. Dino, who double as the pickleball instructor for that group. We appreciate that. Diversity Committee Liaison, Mrs. Marcus. BOCES Budget Rep, Mrs. Luna. We also have to fill some committees for the Audit Committee. Who's interested in doing that? Mrs. Danino, Ms. Aragona, Mr. Pileski. For the Policy Committee, Mr. Murray, Mr. Luna, Mrs. Marcus. The Facilities Committee, Mr. Murray, Mrs. Danino, and Mr. Pileski. Thank you for that. Moving on to consent agenda, I'd like to ask for a consent agenda on reorganization resolutions 2307R9 through 2307. She always does this. 69 or 70? 69. Resolutions 2307R9. This is what she does. She just gets me going. Definitely 69? Okay, not 7? All right, we'll do it afterwards, so it's fine. 230769, may I have a motion, please? Mrs. Danino, second. Mr. Murray, all in favor? May I ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mr. Luna, second. Mr. Pileski, all in favor? This concludes the reorganization meeting. We'll now reopen the regular monthly meeting. May I have a motion to accept the minutes of the June 14th, 2023 monthly meeting? Mrs. Danino, second. Mr. Murray, all in favor? May I have a motion to accept the minutes of the June 29th, 2023 work session? Mrs. Marcus, second. Mr. Lunar, all in favor? Moving on to presentations, Dr. Lynch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Belmont. Well, a great way to kick off the superintendency is to call the following students to come forward, please. So would Mr. Luminati, Ms. Berkowitz, and Ms. Curley please come forward?
So let me tell you some things about these folks. The All-American is the highest athletic achievement a high school student can receive. This spring, Lynbrook had 3. Jake Luminati received academic All-American honors for his combination of grades and athletic accomplishments, which included all-county recognition.
As a goalie, he had 234 saves this season for a save percentage of 61%, which ranks him amongst the top goalies. And for his career, he had 311 saves and a save percentage of 63%.
Mimi Berkowitz was also recognized as an academic All-American. Mimi was a 3-time All-County honoree. As a senior, she scored 46 goals and had 14 assists. Over her high school career, she had 127 goals and 49 assists. Yes. Excellent. And Sarah Curley received All-American honors. She is also a 3-time All-County player. This season, she scored 47 goals and had 38 assists. Over her career,
Sarah has amassed 131 goals and 83 assists for a total of 214 career points. Yep, and I think, Andrew, do you want to stay just for a picture? Yeah, we normally have the thing. How about right in front of the board here? So I'm going to give you, how many T-shirts have you guys received over the last couple of years? It's a little bittersweet though, right? Your last set of Lynbrook T-shirts. So here we go. And if members of the board want to join us, yep, sure, right there.
It's in the video.
before moving on at this time, this is when we typically allow those students who we acknowledge that they can move on to their other evening activities, and helps us get rid of Mr. Berkowitz. So, congratulations. Enjoy your summer. Good luck at school. Moving on, we have one retirement this evening. If Miss Catherine McEntee could please stand up. Whereas Mrs. Catherine McEntee, account clerk in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective September 29th, 2023, after spending over 8 years in her career at Lynbrook Office of Special Services. And whereas Mrs. McEntee's superior calculation abilities could remind us that it was exactly 8 years, 2 months, and 2 days, or 3,005 days of service to Lynbrook Public Schools. And whereas Mrs. McEntee's career started by working for the IRS, she spent some time volunteering her accounting skills to complete tax returns for individuals in need of this support. With a brief stop in the Seaford School District, Mrs. McEntee found her home in the Lynbrook Public Schools in July of 2015. Whereas Mrs. McEntee took her responsibilities very seriously, ensuring the budget and grant funds were spent appropriately, with every penny that was spent being accounted for. Mrs. McEntee was responsible for all billing related to all aspects of special services provided to Lynbrook students from preschool to age 21 here in Lynbrook and throughout the state of New York. She took great care in assuring the accuracy of the bills and the billing process. And whereas Mrs. McEntee's unique sense of humor, affection for sweets, and diligent work ethic will be missed by colleagues and friends in the Office of Special Services, Administration Building, and throughout the district. And whereas Mrs. McEntee is looking forward to spending more time with her husband, John, and her 3 sons, and is hoping to extend her travel beyond her frequent visits to her son in Arizona by going on an Alaskan cruise into Ireland. And whereas the Board of Education would like to thank Mrs. McEntee for her extraordinary approach to her job and wish her a happy and healthy retirement. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby thanks Catherine McEntee for her service to the Lynbrook schools and accepts her resignation for purposes of retirement effective September 29th, 2023. Congratulations. And as we lose one, we gain one. Nicole Goulet, if you could stand up, please. Welcome. This is our new English teacher at the high school in Dent North. Congratulations. And before we move on, Mrs. McEntee and Mr. Goulet, you are free to go. Moving on, reports from trustees. Away from it, right? Keeps bouncing in. I like to move around there, kid. The reports from trustees, anybody have anything to report?
We had graduations. I think that they were all, went really well. Unfortunately, the high school ended up being indoors, but it was still, a great celebration. South, we made it just, within a couple of minutes of rain. The pre-prom celebration at Atlantic Avenue, luckily the weather cooperated for that. And, again, thank you to the chamber for organizing the event. I don't know what other districts do, but it really is, a special time for the kids. And it's nice to see so many people out there that don't have kids that are going to the prom, but they're just community members that, want to see everybody dressed up beautifully and support the community and the local businesses.
And before moving on, I also want to welcome our new Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Operations, and Information Systems, Mr. Joel Press. Welcome. Old business, Dr. Lynch?
So the topic under old business is we had a report from the Assessment, Weighting, and Grading Commission back in May. And I know that the board had some vibrant discussion regarding that a few weeks ago. I think there are still some issues that need to be addressed through it. So I think we will be addressing some of those issues in the fall, and we'll be getting back to you on those.
Yeah, I think that's something that's been a lot of conversation about. I think it's a board priority, and I can see the consensus of the board that we make sure early into next academic year, we look to make sure we're comfortable with what we're doing in those areas of the curriculum. Anybody else have comments or thoughts?
Yeah, so one issue I'd like to address is the Regents exams, and I know that was wrapped up in the assessment committee that we're going to be discussing further, or the results from the assessment committee. But I do want to express my real disappointment that this board did not act sooner and look into this issue that could help kids this past academic year. We just went through a year where so many districts on Long Island adopted a policy called do no harm for Regents exams. And just as background for those who are less familiar, the New York State Board of Regents, which puts out the Regents exam, actually recommends that the Regents exam not be included in a kid's GPA, in a kid's final grade for the class. So if a child has an 88, 88, 88, and 88 for the 4 quarters, that child would have an 88. If the child has a 70 on their Regents exam, the child's transcript would still reflect, if you don't count the Regents exam, an 88. By counting the Regents exam for that child who got a 70 on a Regents exam, his grade would be lowered to an 85 or an 86. In this world of competitive college admissions, every single point matters. And it's really disappointing when we've surveyed other districts on Long Island that so many districts adopted a policy for this past year, and actually for the past 2 academic years, called do no harm. So what is do no harm? Do no harm is a policy as follows. If your Regents grade will bring up your class average, it counts. If your Regents grade would bring down your class average, it will not be weighted in your average, and you'll get the average of your 4 quarters. So using my example of a child who has an 88, 88, 88, and 88, who got a 70 on the Regents, without do no harm, that kid's transcript reflects an 85. With do no harm, that child's transcript reflects an 88, 3 points. Now, when our kids apply to colleges, they're compared to their peers on Long Island. For this past academic year, so many districts on Long Island have adopted do no harm. Which districts? The more competitive ones. Hewlett, Syosset, Jericho, just to name a few, Half Hollow Hills, Belmore Merrick. These are the districts that our kids are competing with for the few precious college spots, and those kids now have an advantage over our children. I cannot fathom why this board would not adopt a policy sooner that would have helped our students compete on a level playing field. Now, what troubled me, and the reason I'm speaking on this issue, is just 2 weeks ago, on June 18th, the Hewlett-Woodmere District convened a board meeting. It was in the middle of the Regents exam period, and the students had expressed some concern about not having do no harm in their district. They had it the year before it went away, and parents had expressed some concern. And their board met on June 18th, and they voted. And what the president of their board said was as follows: if every school district around us is doing something to help them being the children, why would we not do the same for our children? And I ask the same question to this board. It's really disappointing that when every district that our kids are being compared to for this past academic year adopted a policy to put their kids at an advantage, we are maintaining for this past year a policy that puts our kids at a competitive disadvantage. I have heard no reason at all why Lynbrook kids should not get every advantage of a kid who's in Hewlett or Belmore Merrick or any of the other districts I've read. There's countless districts that have gone in this direction. It's disappointing. And it's even more disappointing when we ran some numbers, and of every Regents exam given for this past academic year, and this is an important stat, more than 50% of students were harmed by not having do no harm. Let that sink in. Half of the Regents exams given brought down a child's average. If that exact child lived 4 blocks over in Hewlett, that child's average would have been higher. So to me, I have to say, we hear a lot of criticism in the community about Lynbrook not putting our kids in a position to succeed. This is a prime example. We should have addressed this sooner. We should have looked to do this retroactively at this point, because our kids who are applying to colleges are at a disadvantage. And I know it's on the agenda. We're going to look at it on a prospective basis going forward, but I have a real tough time looking at a parent of a graduating or of a junior in the eyes who will not benefit by what we do next year. So if you're a junior, you had your Regents exams count the past 2 years when kids in other districts didn't. So yes, we may fix it going forward. That's great, but it doesn't help those kids. If you're a sophomore, you've had 2 years of Regents. It hasn't helped you. I have to say, I think it's disappointing that we are simply allowing we're not following what other competitive districts are doing and putting our own kids at a disadvantage.
So just to clarify, when you say didn't help you, so those students that did well on the exams, it did help them. You're just saying for the kids that didn't do well.
So if you, under a do no harm policy, if the Regents exam would
No, I know
bring you
it's
up,
positive, but you said it didn't help them. So the students that didn't help are the ones that didn't do well on it.
So for 49.83 exams that were given in this district, the Regents exam either did not hurt or helped.
Percentage, not
Percentage,
exams.
percentage.
You said exams.
I'm sorry, percentage of exams. For 50.17% of Regents exam given, they lowered the child's average.
But what you're not factoring in is that 49%, almost 50%, it didn't make a difference. So you took that and you said 50% of the students it harmed.
Correct.
Well, almost 37%, they gained 1 point.
No, they lost 1 point.
I mean, no, they would have gained a point.
If
they
you know, right, and that
So-
child may have gained another point in another class, another point in another. There were 1,700 as a parent of a child who's affected, who's in the district, and I know so many kids in the school, I can't hear any rationale. I've never heard a rationale as to why our kids are being graded on a policy that is different and disadvantageous to kids in surrounding districts.
This is why we're going to look into this, and this is one of the things that needs to be addressed. But, you know, when you say this board didn't do anything, you were on this board.
Well, this was actually raised 2 years ago at a board meeting by Ms. Danino before I got on the board, and she raised some significant concerns about it, and before I was on the board, nothing was done. Now, you're right, I was on the board, and I'm personally disappointed in myself for not pushing this harder this year. I was told there's a commission studying it, let's see what the commission reports. I don't want to make any criticisms about the commission at all. They did hard work, they put in a lot of time, but Hewlett changed the game, because that's our closest.
Hewlett made a change during the current school year.
After several Regents exams
But they
had been
still made
administered.
it before final grades were in.
Right, so
that's different. We are into a new school year already.
Right, and we know that under applicable law, we certainly could go back and fix
It's not a matter of what's legal. It's a matter of what's right. And you are now, if we go back in time, we are going into teachers' grade books, changing grades that, I mean, I'm on the school board, I've been on the board for 15 years. I'm a lawyer, not an educator. We hire people to educate the students, and we give them latitude to figure out their grades. How do we go back now and say, I'm sorry, we're opening it up and we're changing your grades?
I understand that's a concern. I don't think that's a concern. We should have acted sooner on this. But how do we equally tell a parent of a junior who's about to apply to college, we understand Hewlett's board was much more proactive at their last meeting before the end of the year than we were, and I'm sorry, your kid will have a slightly lower GPA. Hope it works out in the end.
I honestly don't, I
The
mean, I know
only thing
that.
I could say is that when children are applying for colleges, thankfully they do recalculate the grades. I mean, that's not helpful in this situation, and I am happy you know my feelings, because I've brought this up for years and believe that we should have a do no harm policy. I think the students need to care about the exams that they're taking, but I do not think that it should be hurting them. We can't rely on the state for the exams that they're throwing at us. When they're recommending that these exams shouldn't count, why we're counting them has baffled me. I've been saying it. We reversed that decision years ago. Still upsets me, but I was in the minority. So here we are again, back to this conversation. I'm really happy we're going to visit it again in the fall, but I think that's not the only issue that we need to revisit. I think we have to have a lot more equality across the grading. I think we have to look at policies and practices in our classrooms of, are we mastering what the students are learning? It's not just like, hey, you got this grade. No, you have to learn what is being taught. It's not just about the grade, it's about mastery. And I think that's something we're sometimes too focused on the grades, not just the mastery. And I think that's an area we need to look at as well.
I would just like to say that we're making some statements here that are very black and white, but it seems to me that there's a lot of gray that we're not referring to. When you apply to colleges, you know, all these colleges have their own algorithms, and they just disregard all the weighting done for honors classes, AP classes, and they look at everything in its totality, and they value what they want more heavily or more lightly. With that being said, to make a comment like we're putting kids at a disadvantage versus Hewlett, I just disagree with that wholeheartedly, for the simple reason that, you know, you're assuming that the little tiny bit of higher average at Hewlett is going to make the difference versus the much lower Regents grade on those kids' transcripts going forward. Like, and you made a statement, Andy, that 50% of the kids were harmed, but what you're not saying is that 98% of the kids that these Regents grades were calculated, 98% of these kids, their average dropped less than 2 points or less, 2 points or less. So even kids who did incredibly poor on the Regents exam, their average only dropped 2 points. So what you have to weigh that against is, how poorly would they have done? And if it didn't weigh anything, it could have been significantly lower. And great, their grades would have been 2 points higher. But now, instead of a 75 or an 80 on the Regents exams, there might be a 45 or a 50 on the Regents exam. And we do many things as a board, and we do issue a lot of policy that puts these kids at an advantage. We have a minimum grade policy in this school that you know, the lowest quarter grade recommended is 55 points. So we are doing things to help inflate their average the whole way through. Where's the accountability? There has to be some accountability at some point. Now, if everyone going forward, all these other districts go to a do no harm, that's 100% something we should consider. And you're making statements like so many other districts. We don't have the data of how many districts throughout Long Island have done this. We have a bunch of neighboring districts, you know, a partial list of neighboring districts who've done this. We don't have the full data. I'd love to know the full data. And if all these districts are going towards it, it's 100% something we should consider. Even though, and I have to state publicly, I still feel if there are districts not doing do no harm, our national ranking, which influences college admission, will decrease if our Regents average per school decreases. If our Regents grades on certain Regents exams decreases, our national rankings will decrease. And then that in turn will keep some of our better students out of our top schools, because Lynbrook won't be looked upon as highly. So there's so much gray here that we're just ignoring, you know, and I don't think that's right. I think do no harm is something we need to consider, especially if, as a trend on Long Island, most districts are going towards it. You can't make the comment that most districts are, because we don't have the full data. With that being said, it's 100% something we have to consider. There has to be more uniformity within grading in general in the district. We have to figure out the appropriate final exams, weighting. There's so much we have to look at. This particular one, though, it's not a slam dunk argument. I'm sorry. It's not like we're hurting these kids by counting it. I don't know that we're hurting these kids because a lot of these middle of the road students might completely tank if we take away the 10% and holding that over his head. If a kid has a 67 average going into the final and we say it's not worth anything, that kid's not going to study for the final or the Regents exam.
And remember, we already dropped it from 20% to 10% because the 10% was not making as big an impact on the final grade. And Pat, I just wanted to clarify, I think the minimum grade for a quarter is a practice, not a policy.
So as to the percentages, I only have the data that I have in front of me, and I didn't pull this together. This was pulled together by our central administration, but from the districts that reported and that we have information on, it's a very large majority. We all got the same information. I haven't polled every district in New York State, but I only have what I have. And from the districts that responded, there's really only a handful that are still counting the Regents exams. Even if it's not only a handful, even if only 40% were doing do no harm, I want to be in that 40%.
We say we're going to look at it.
I agree, but we should have been there for the past 2 years. That's where I have a disappointment. And just to one point that Pat said, I agree with you. There has to be accountability, 100%. So using your example of the middle-of-the-road kid who, if the Regents doesn't count, he's not going to study or she's not going to study, there's your accountability. That kid's transcript is going to reflect the 50, and if it does, that's on that kid. But to apply a policy that puts our kids just in this area at a disadvantage, look, is 2 points in one class going to make a difference in getting into a college or not? Maybe. I'd like to think it doesn't, but 2 points in chemistry, 2 points in global, a point here, a point there, that could be a full point on the kid's GPA overall, and that absolutely could make a difference. And yes, the colleges do deconstruct and they do their own weighting, but they start with the final class grade. They don't know, did that include a Regent? Did it not include a Regent? Let's say we move to do no harm for next year, and now you have a rising sophomore who's going to be a junior. They're going to have 2 years where the Regents did count, 1 year where it didn't count. How does the college know what to do? I'm just saying we should have done this because yes, by the way, I don't want to be misinterpreted that say Lynbrook puts our kids at a disadvantage across the board. I think this particular policy has put our kids at a disadvantage.
When you're talking about advantage or disadvantage, maybe holding them accountable is putting them at an advantage because they'll be more successful in college or in their jobs or in life. I mean, it's just what you consider to be an advantage and what you consider to be successful. And second of all, what you're talking about is, I believe, and Dr. Bolekas, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've had 3 kids that have gone to colleges and they've done well in Lynbrook and done well in college, and 2 of them are, full-grown adults working. I believe that when we send out the applications, there is the Lynbrook School District profile, and that contains, because the colleges want to know, how much do we weigh an honors class? How much do we weigh an AP class? And that's how the colleges back out all those numbers, so they have level playing fields between all these different schools. So I believe that if there was do no harm, that would be in there also. Is that accurate?
It's accurate, but
I was asking Dr. Bolekas.
No, but I'm saying he nodded. I'm agreeing.
Okay.
It's accurate, but the point is, you just made it the perfect argument for why we should be retroactive. Because if we have a rising sophomore who's a junior or a rising freshman who's a sophomore, when that kid applies in 2 years, their transcript will reflect Lynbrook is a do no harm district. We don't count the Regents. But for that kid, they will have Regents counted for 2 years with a transcript that says we don't count the Regents. They will have a split transcript, and the only policy listed is a do no harm policy, because the transcript, and tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bolekas, the transcript would not say, well, Lynbrook is a do no harm district, but 2 years ago for the kid's freshman year, we did count the Regents. It wouldn't be that level of specificity, correct?
Well, the transcript doesn't have that level of specificity. That's all within the profile which accompanies the transcript, and
Right.
we can put whatever level of specificity that you feel comfortable with in that profile.
Okay. That's
Because
helpful.
at one point, we didn't have 5% for honors and 10% for AP.
Right.
So, those are things that we can work out, but you're making these blanket statements that aren't like all accurate, and the colleges will know how we calculate the grades. So,
And I
I'm
think
not
just
disagreeing with you on that.
The other thing that is vital here, some of us keep talking about regents, and most of the classes that students in the high school take are not regents, and they all have finals, and those finals have a different weighting than the regents, and that's also something that needs to be discussed. So this can't be a one fix, oh, we're just going to not count the regents if it hurts kids. There needs to be a much fuller discussion and not as simple as just regents or do no harm, because there are a lot more classes students take with a final that currently counts 20% in their average, which is another thing that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you on that, Sean. I agree with you. That's an important point also.
okay.
So, Mr. Murray, thank you for bringing that up, because, you know, these public meetings, although not well attended now, are watched, and it's important to people to understand what we're going to be looking at in the fall is the entire process, to make sure we're doing the same thing for everyone at the same level, and that's why the board will spend no time on do harm. And just to reiterate, separate from no harm, it's important for people to understand in the community when they have those conversations about weighted, few of us have had kids who've gone through the process already. The colleges have been very specific where my two kids went and explained to us they are literally going to take your high school transcript. They don't care about the way that they will extrapolate it out. Irrelevant. It's still, people still may want to have whatever reasons, but don't kid yourselves about that when your kids are going off to college, if that's where their goal is to go. The colleges are going to look at those scores purely as the grades are, and they know every district weighs things differently, and some districts give the same class 20% and 10%. They're aware of that process that they're doing that. But this is a good, healthy debate. I look forward to us continuing this in some fall, and looking forward to what information you bring, Dr. Lynch. Moving on to, and we took care of the new committees on new business. Goes your reports, Dr. Lynch.
Okay, so tonight is the second reading of the Code of Conduct, and therefore it will be considered adopted after tonight. Our summer program report. So we have a lot going on in our buildings right now. Down at Waverly, we have our extended summer year program, and that has 60 students in it. Our regular summer school has 60 students in it. We have a special English as a new language program up at West End, and that has 20 students in it. And we are approaching, if not over, 600 students at Summer Playground this year. So still very active buildings that are going on. So that's the summer programs, and then even though it's Mr. Press's first night, we will not make him do a capital project update, so I'll handle that from my old role as assistant superintendent. So if you've been down by Waverly recently, you can see the courts are progressing very nicely. They should be done very soon. We're waiting actually on the parking lot there. Also good progress in the high school library. It's been completely gutted, and it's starting to be roughed out. We have begun both the Marion Street Turf Project and the North Middle Turf Project. We did have to close the track at Marion Street because of the construction. The playground part is happening first, so we just need to do an abundance of caution there. And that's all I have.
Anything out, like on the website, the track is closed?
I know Mrs. Macchia put out a parent link today, but we can put that onto the website.
Because people outside of Marion Street do use it, the general community.
At this time, we'll move on to public comments. If anyone would like to address the board, please come forward. If you could pick up the microphone from Mrs. Moran. And just like America's Got Talent, you could pick that circle there in front of the camera. Just identify yourself and whether you live in or around a district.
Hi, I'm Allison Greenberg. I'm a resident. I wanted to talk a little bit about the do no harm policy. So first, I just wanted to clarify what a regent's grade actually is. It's not total points. It's not an average. It's a scale score. So if you get a 90, it's not a 90%. It's also not 90 like total points, okay? So on a chemistry regents, if you get a 90 scale score, you actually earned 93% of the total points. On the Algebra 2 regents, if you get a 90, you actually only earned 87% of the total points on the exam. So when you talk about accountability for regents exams, I don't think it's the same thing as talking about a final exam, because in a final exam, you're getting total points or you're getting an average. So you expect a bell curve on that. There isn't a bell curve on regents exams. In fact, 65 is a benchmark that represents proficiency, that you've met New York State learning standards. 85 is a benchmark they set for distinction, or as you say, mastery. So you talk about helping or hurting kids, and most people talk about, well, if you don't study, blah, 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 you get a 50, you're accountable. Nobody talks about the higher performers. If you have an average that's above a 95 in any class, and you get between, say, an 85 and a 94, you have mastered the New York State learning standards, but your class grade automatically goes down 1 point. So what are we telling the kids? Congratulations, you got mastery, but you still get to lose points on your average that you worked 10 months to study and work hard for, when everybody here is going to say 90 is great, right? You did great. You got mastery. So I think there are other things to look at. I think when people see these transcripts, they think, oh, this kid got a 75. They got 75%. No, they didn't get 75%. They got a different score. So I just wanted to clear that up and have that as part of your discussion, and say that also this past year, the regents had some leeway. So for 50%, you could pass with a superintendent's determination, and I don't think people even had to apply for that this year. The first year, I believe you did have to apply for that. The first year that was in place, we only counted regencies for 5% of the grade and finals for 10%. So I'm wondering if New York State this past year was still giving that fallback, why would we return to the 10%? Why wouldn't we have continued the 5% since New York State was still giving the leeway? So if you don't want to go back and give do no harm, which I'm absolutely in favor of do no harm for these kids, could you discuss perhaps lowering it to 5%? Then the child who gets a 90 does not lose a point automatically on their average. You're closing the gap a little bit when New York State's saying we're still expecting some learning lag from COVID. Those are just my thoughts, and I think it's something that you guys need to be aware of, because let's say the over 45 age group, like when we took our regencies, they were actually the points that you earned. So you could do 0 to 100. Now, New York State, for all of the regencies, has a 1 to 5 scale, with the exception of science, which is 1 to 4. They're going to turn that over. My question to the board is, should New York State have decided their scale score was 1 through 5 rather than 0 to 100? Would we even be having this discussion? Would you have even ever counted it as part of a grade average? Would you have decided a 5, everyone who scored a 5 got 100, everyone who scored a 4 gets an 80? Well, that's ridiculous, right? Because there's a huge range in those ranges for the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it wouldn't be heard of. So I think you need to think about things that way, because it truly is a scale score and not a representative score. Whereas when a teacher makes a final or any test, and you talk about college, so let's talk about college because I have a child in college. Teacher gives the test, okay? Mean on a test, 8 out of 20. If you kid came home and told you, I got a 12 out of 20, you'd be like, what? You got a 60? That's horrible. Well, guess what? When the mean was an 8, the 12 was an A. So the teacher could then scale it after having the results, get their bell curve, say, I'm setting the class at a B minus, or I'm setting the class at a C plus. And that's really how most colleges work. They set classes to a curve. Teachers have no leeway for grading these regencies. The scale scores are set, you earn X points, this is your scale score. So I think when you talk about going back and changing teachers' grades, you're not actually changing teachers' grades, you're actually changing the weight of something that is a scale score. That's something that the teacher did not create. If you are going back and you're going to redo finals, then you are changing teachers' scores, because the teacher has control over creating the final examinations. They don't have control over what New York State puts on the Regents exams. And I would actually urge you to get data on, let's say, this year chemistry had 2 teachers who teach honors chemistry. If we're going to say that honors, we want accountability for the students, then you should have the same amount of people in teacher A and teacher B, same score distribution, right? So we should have the same percentage of proficiency among classes. Do we? I don't know. I don't have that data, but you should, and you should look at that in your discussion. So that's what I want to say, and I hope that I've heard that it's not against the law to go back, so I'm hoping that you will go back and try and reward these children for their hard work. Because I can personally tell you, most children I know study hard, work hard. There are many studies out there that show, for instance, the temperature of the day can affect taking a test. Bad news, getting sick. No one is not going to show up for their Regents because they have a bad stomach. They don't want to go take Regents in August. They don't want to take it again next year. They're going to come and take it. They might not be optimal, and they may do bad. And I hear a lot of, well, let's say their average is 90, right? And they got a 75 on the Regents. How's that going to look to the college? Wouldn't that be a great essay for a kid to write? Here's the things that affected my ability to take this one exam. Here's the outlier on my transcript. Here's why that happened. So we want accountability, but we need accountability for the right reasons. So I hope that you all take that into consideration when you further this discussion. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You can bring me the mic, just in case
Thank
someone else
you.
comes up. Thank you.
My name is Courtney Knack. I am a resident of Lynbrook Schools. I have 3 kids in the school district. I know you're probably also, unfortunately familiar with my name because all I do is write you emails. But I wanted to come and also echo the sentiment of needing to at least consider doing retroactive do no harm for this past school year. One of the things that's come up in these conversations that actually really concerns me, there is a lot of conflating happening between, in terms of the defense of not adopting this policy, conflation between what happens with a kid's transcripts when it gets to a college with regard to weighting versus their course averages. I think we're not really truly understanding what's going on. I agree that when a kid's transcript arrives at almost all schools, they have their own algorithm to recalculate a child's average with regard to weight, right? I think for Lynbrook, it's 5% for an honors course, 10% for an AP, and that's all well and good. It can't be held, and every school has their own individual algorithm, but that's not addressing the inclusion of a Regents score in their course average. So I would really hope that we can stop using that as a possible defense of keeping our children's Regents scores as 10% because it is taken care of when they apply to college. No, you're not understanding. It's only for their weight. So AP course at one school versus AP course at a different school, and a school, in Suffolk County counts an AP for only 7%. That's what's getting taken care of when they apply for college. And in terms of this idea that it's only 1 point, it's only 2 points, if that didn't matter to you for your college-aged kids, that's fine. But I'm telling you right now as a parent, it would matter for me. If my kid walked into a Regents, science, for example, and really struggled all year in chemistry and walked into that test with a 66 average and then proceeded to fail the Regents, let's say, and now, let's say, fail with a 60 or whatever, and it pulls them to a failing grade, that's 2 points that really mattered to me and it mattered to my kid. Or for a child that's a really high achiever that walked in having a 90 and then they did poorly that day and now they have an 88. I think we all can agree for a kid, end up parent, whoever, 90 to an 88 matters. And in terms of the accountability component, it is going on their transcript, right? That child, like my kid with a 66 and then let's say a 58 on the chemistry Regents, that is still apparent to the person judging them when they apply through Naviance or whatever it is. It's not a complete removal of any accountability, it's still there. And I wonder if we've considered at all in terms of that accountability part, and you're worried about hypothetically our rankings going down because our Regent scores might slip. By the way, I did a deep dive on the Belmar-Merrick School District data. They're doing okay. But separate to that, instead of doing this carrot versus a stick, make the carrot huge. Make it so that if a kid does really well, go back to the 20%. right? Like bribe them into doing well instead of punishing them for having a bad day. I would really love to see, and again, my children are getting older. Their Regents exams, their grades where they're going to take to Regents, those years are approaching, and I want to know that my kid, I know apparently it's a little offensive to say it's disadvantageous to be here versus Hewlett, but those are the kids our kids are going to be competing against. And I want to know that they had every advantage, including these ultimately flawed or faulty tests where you can get a 94% on chemistry and a 91 goes into your grade, that I know that they weren't disadvantaged by our school district counting that hypothetical 91 for them, where it wouldn't count in their course average one town over. I do think considering this retroactively is something that really needs to be considered, because I know we need to give teachers the flexibility. I'm a teacher and I value that, but they didn't choose that 10%. That is chosen for them. So going back and reconsidering whether or not it needs to count when 50% of kids, I don't care if it's minus 0.01. That's not for us to determine. That's up for the kid, their parent, to see if they individually care about that 1 or 2 points. But I don't think it's much to ask that after all is said and done to reconsider whether or not it's up to the board as a group to care about 1 or 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else from the audience, we'll move on to consent agenda. I'd like to ask for consent agenda on resolutions 2307C1 through 2307C9, 2307NC1 through 2307NC2, and 2307G1 through 2307G43. May I have a motion, please? Ms. Aragon, second. Mrs. Marcus, all in favor? Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mr. Pileski, second. Mr. Murray, all in favor? Thank you very much. The board will be having their annual retreat this evening, and our next meeting will be on August 14th at 7:30 a.m. here again in the Kindergarten Center. Everyone enjoy the summer.